What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Hi guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Kevin Moore Show. Now my guest today is Joe McQuillen. Now Joe is the author of two books. They are My Search for Christopher on the Other Side and his latest book, We're Not Done Yet Pop, My Lessons from the Other Side. Now Joe McQuillen and his wife Sally experienced the devastating loss of their son Christopher back in 2016. And since then, Joe has been communicating with Christopher from the other side, sharing Christopher's messages and teachings through his books and website. Joe joins me today from Chicago. Joe McQuillen, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on.
You know, Kevin, thanks for having me. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, I know it's been a while, right? I want to say 2 years, but am I right to say 2 years?
That's right. It was 2 years.
2 years ago, you came on to the Channeling docuseries. You actually were the first episode, the first one to put out. And I really enjoyed the time I spent with you in Chicago. And I'm going to link that interview below as well. And it was so beautiful to see the amount of people that, still do get a lot from our interview that we did together on episode 1 of They Call Us Channelers. And I was also so touched as well that you, have included me on the back of your book as well with a quick little synopsis of what I thought of the work that you're doing. And I read it last night, actually. And thank you for that very much.
I was flattered to have you do it, Kevin. I mean that. The documentary, the docuseries was amazing start to finish. And Chris and I were both honored to be part of it.
Well, it's just an honor, Joe, to have you on that docuseries, and we're just playing back a few clips from that episode 1, and we'll link episode 1 in the description below. So just to begin with, Joe, just give the audience who may not have come across your story before, just give them a bit of background to the 2016 events which started you on this path.
Sure. You know, Kevin, in fact, it's coming up on 6 years, January 3rd. And today is actually 71 months, and after we're done here, I have an appointment that I'm going to go to the grave and put a Christmas tree out there for us. And so it was my boy, Chris, was 21, and he was home for Christmas break, and a dozen of his friends. It was the last weekend before returning back to school, and a dozen of his friends met at a lake house in Lake Beulah, Wisconsin, and decided to spend the night. One kid had a large lake house and go to a local pub, shoot some pool, kick up their heels, raise a little hay, and come back the next day. And when I was waiting for Chris's return the next day, I got a text from the kid who owned the lake house and said, "Mr. McHugh, Chris and 3 friends are missing." So I grabbed the Labrador, jumped in the Jeep and started heading up north when I got a call that said it was no longer a search, but a recovery since all 4 boys had drowned. At that point, Kev, your screen goes a little black and you go into a little shock. But 16 years before that, I had stumbled on a medium and done a medium session with her. And most of it was not eventful. But the very end of it, she said, your dad's here and he's telling me railroad. Now, if you look over my shoulder, if you recall, there's a railroad lantern on my bookcase. My dad spent 40 years on the railroad. Every boy in the family worked on the railroad during college. My grandfather, my uncle were railroaders. We were a railroad family. So that bit of information, although, it wasn't all that insightful. I didn't get the lottery numbers or the keys to the universe, but I did realize that the old man was somewhere. And I thought, that's interesting. 16 years later, driving up to claim my son's body, I thought, wait a minute, if my dad's somewhere and Christopher just left this world, he's got to be with him. So I got to try to figure this out. I got to piece this together. And that started my journey, Kevin. I got Bob Olson wrote a book that was very helpful to me, kind of a boots on the ground guy instead of, nothing too frilly. And so, I read his book and took some cues about souls and spirit and decided to find out through medium spirit sessions and eventually spirit writing how to connect and that's continued to this day, and grateful to have it,
Absolutely. And what would you say is the difference then between this book and the first book?
The first book, I think, the first book was kind of a journey of the first 2 years of, kind of a finding my way and kind of stumbling through the metaphysical to figure out and kind of explaining where I was on that journey. Where the second book, although Christopher still continues to come to me a couple times a month, 2 or 3 times a month in spirit writing, where he'll come to me in this room at 3:00 in the morning. He'll wake me up and I'll come in and I'll get downloads from him. And every one of those downloads, every one of those visits is in both books. And the second book, there's a lot more lessons for parents who've lost kids, which is what Christopher wants me to do. I was tying up the first book, Kev, and feeling a little melancholy because we'd been together on that book, every keystroke, every paragraph. And as I was tying it up, he said, we're not done yet, Pop. We'll be doing this together till you cross. So, it kind of put me on notice that this was my new path. This was my new journey, that I'll be writing books until I'm about to step across the stream where he is,
And there is a third book that I believe that you're already talking about, right?
We're in no monster hurry. Even with the second book, I had all this data, all this information, all these experiences written down. And in February, I spent 2 months at my beloved sister's house in Florida. She crossed over. She was Christopher's godmother, one of his absolute favorite people on the planet. They just adored each other. And he was there when she crossed. He told me. And so I was at her house, and all of a sudden I sat down and it all came together. And it was just amazing to overlook this, beautiful setting in the Gulf Coast of Florida where Chris and I connect. He loved that house. He felt loved there and free there. And Marcia's spirit moves freely through there, So she crossed over in February 6, 2019. And I had been with her about a week before she had transitioned. And she said to me, honey, and she would call me Joey or honey. She said, honey, you gave me the greatest gift. I read your book and I'm not afraid to die. Now, this from a woman who was such a source of love for me my entire life, even when I wasn't lovable, even when I didn't deserve to be loved, she was a source of love for me. So, the following January, as I always do on my birthday, I see a medium. And I saw this gal, Jill Nicole, in the western suburbs. And she said, your son Chris is here, of course, but there's a woman here who has the title of sister, aunt, mother, godmother. I said, that's my sister Marcia. And she's given you a message. She said to tell you, honey, thanks for the greatest gift. How do you put those things together without knowing that people you love are on the other side?
And it's not like you was on a PR campaign at the time, talking about, these things. No one knew of that, but the story you're telling now. And just that validation, as was the validation all throughout the journey, reconnecting with Christopher as well. Let's be honest. Yeah, that's amazing. That is incredible. And was she one of the original mediums that was in the first book?
No, Jill Nicole was not, because I had the first book, it made it through January. There was the first 2 years, January 3, 2018. So I saw her on January of 2019. Or 2000, I'm sorry, I saw her January 2020. So she'll be in this third book.
Excellent. No, that's great. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Yeah. And what a message. I'm about to launch my own psychic service called channeling.com. It's,
beautiful.
And it's it takes up all my time. It's just taken everything from me to get this to launch. But not only will it be a reader's platform, and I want high quality readers on there, it'll be a resource for anything to do with channeling, okay, in which we're going to obviously have you featured on there as well, which I haven't even asked you about yet, but wonderful. Anyone that's brought material through that's channeled it's going to be a resource for all this as well, right? And I was very lucky to get the domain name channeling.com, okay?
I love it.
And yeah, I've always used mediums throughout my life, not all the time, but just like you, when they need it. And do you know what? I've never really had a bad reading, I'm going to be honest. And I'm pretty sure that's the same with you. I mean, if you're going to go look for it, you'll probably find it. But I've stayed with people that have always had a connection with me, and what they come out with sometimes is unbelievable, isn't it? What they'll tell you something, and it's not happened yet. But you don't force yourself to go in that direction. And you know what? It was the best thing you could have done to go in that direction, even though you didn't force it. It just happened, and that it was validated ages ago. It's just so incredible, isn't it?
It's so incredible. This morning, I did an interview on the Tailored Word, which is a radio station out of New Jersey. And she's amazing. Taylor's great. I did one after the first book. And she said, would you mind if I had a medium sit in the first 10 minutes? And I said, no, I would love it. And this woman knew one thing. She knew my first name. And she came, so they introduced us and didn't tell the story. And she said, your boy is here. And I see he's sending me a picture of a grave stone with a logo of a sports team. Well, on Christopher's stone, as you've seen, is the logo of the Buffalo Bills, the team that I grew up in. He was a dedicated fan, kind of like you guys with your soccer teams, and a Celtic cross. And she said, Christopher said he was in some program where he was mentoring others. Well, Sunday, Sally and I are going out to the Penguin Players, which is a troupe of young adults with emotional disabilities. Christopher was a mentor in that program, and we do a fundraiser at a golf outing every year, and half the money goes there, and it goes to scholarships for special ed students who are going to teach special ed. She said to me, Christopher said he's proud of the golf outing and that you should continue to do it. Well, in September was the sixth one. It was the sixth golf outing that we had at Glen Flora Golf Course. And so this was just a drive-by. It was like a cosmic drive-by, and it was 10 minutes. And she said, did Chris, she said, he's an old soul. He says, giving you a message that he's with his friends. Did Chris die with other boys? And I said, Chris transitioned with 3 other boys. He said, just tell you they're all safe. It's like, this woman didn't know me. And bang, in 10 minutes, she just kind of reaffirmed all the things that I knew, but I love to rehear that.
Yeah, and it's not like he's not giving you that message so many times, right? But just to hear it again, and again, this is her way of interpreting what he's saying. I guess as that connection becomes more familiar, it maybe becomes a bit more advanced, which is what it's done with yourself, because again,
Right.
in that room that we're in. So this room that you're in right
Yeah.
now. This is obviously Christopher's room. This was his bedroom,
Yes.
and I've been there. It's got a lovely atmosphere about it, and this is where you feel the veil is I think what you said is less thin in a sense, and you've got that greater connection with him for when you have these downloads, when you have these
It's a
connections.
thin place. I do a chapter in the second book on thin places. This is one. The grave is another one, which you were there also. That's a thin place. Beaches on the Gulf Coast of Florida are thin places. Siesta Key is a thin place. I mean, it goes on, but when you're talking to parents who've lost kids, I just posted on Facebook today steps to connect with your kid, your child who's crossed over. And one of them is finding that sacred place, that thin place. And if the sacred place isn't in a church, or it could be, but it could be, for me, this was a place where his spirit moved freely. Naples, Florida, my sister's house, and I'll be there for 2 months this next year writing also, is a place where, and a little golfing, Kev, is a place where his spirit moves really freely. And so does she. I had a medium. We were on the phone, and I was just sitting there. I had been writing. I was on the deck having a cigar on the lanai, watching the sunset. And she said, "Are you at your sister's house?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, she's really grateful that you're using her house." She said to tell you her house is your house, which I always felt. And she said to me, your sister wants to know where the keys are." First, she said, "Did you put something in her grave on her anniversary?" Which my daughter and I went to her grave, and it's in a wall, and we put in a yellow or a beautiful red rose. And she said, "Marcia loved the rose you put there." And then she said, and now her and I were not on Zoom. Her and I, we were on the phone. And she said to me, "Marcia wants to know where her keys are." So I left the keys when I went up to Siesta Key to see Sally. Sally had come down to Siesta Key for a week. And I looked for the keys where I left them in the minute. They weren't there. She said, "Well, Marcia, just don't lock yourself out," which I laughed. And so I went over to the hook on the door frame and took the master keys and put them in my pocket and walked back out on the deck. And the medium, Sherry Jewell, said to me, "Marcia said, put the keys back on the hook." It's like, it was like, okay, stood up, go put the keys back. I didn't say I put a set of keys in my hook. She didn't, there's nothing on the phone. It was Marcia watching me do my thing and gave me evidence that she's watching it,
We're talking about loss here.
Yeah.
And I get it. Having spent time with you, I get it that it's something that you're always constantly dealing with. I saw your pain there, that you go through on a daily basis. That wasn't on the camera. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just makes me made me appreciate a bit more some of the subtler things. But when we look at loss just right now, I mean look at this. Just recently when this is being taped, there was the Michigan gun shooting where four kids were mained down, and it's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, it's so tragically difficult to move forward, isn't it? And it's easy to say that time is the only healer. I mean, if it wasn't for the spiritual side, where would you be, do you think, if he wasn't able to look at it from a different perspective?
First thing, that anybody who said time heals all wounds hasn't lost a kid. That's the fact. Losing a child is like losing no other. I've lost siblings, I've lost parents, and it's all sad, right? But it's an entirely different thing than having this part of your heart plucked from you. There was a line from a movie called Manchester by the Sea, and the woman lost children in a fire, and she said, "My heart was broken, it'll always be broken." So I think what happens is that Chris, we can't unring the bell of the events. We can't outring the bell of the events that happened in Michigan. We can't help unring the bell of anybody who lost a child, of the accident going on 6 years ago. But what are you going to do with that tragedy? There was a wonderful book called The Shack, a very painful book. And God was talking to a man who lost his daughter very tragically. And God said, just because I work incredible good out of unspeakable tragedies doesn't mean I orchestrate the tragedies. I don't think God moves us around like pawns on a chessboard. I think life happens. People say to me, "Kev, it's not fair." And I tell them the fair is where you go to ride the merry-go-round and eat candy corn. You know what I mean? That's what fair is. Life is life. And, I don't know where I would be or where the grief would have taken me if I wasn't on this path that puts me in direct connection with the boy that I love so dearly. I don't know, but I think I would be a hollow, shallow guy, and I'm not. I'm a different guy than I was prior to January 3, 2016.
Well, this is why, when I mention that shooting or any tragedy like that,
Yeah.
the reason I'm mentioning it for is that, your work gives parents permission to heal. I'm pretty
Yes.
sure of that, right? And
Yes.
and that's who you're trying to reach as well. You're trying to reach and help heal, other parents that have gone through something similar.
That's the entire reason for my existence from this part going forward, or since January 3rd, 2016 going forward. Chris told me that. That's why I'm on this path. And he said, Dad, people will listen to you because of who you are. I mean, you can identify with me. I'm a regular guy on an amazing journey. I have a brush cut and a broken nose, yet I'm sitting here with sage burning and candles and crystals, because that gives me the edge, that allows me to get in spirit to connect with my boy. And that nothing's more important to me than that.
Yeah, and all this started, let's say this, we talk about 2016, obviously that's when Christopher tragically passed, but your journey actually started, I believe, in 2001 with your
Right.
father, Iron Joe, who,
Right.
when your father passed, of course you were, upset, but, I suppose with a parent passing, it's still very, very difficult, but it's a different type of...
Much.
Yeah, it's a different type of healing, isn't it? It's a different type
Different
of loss.
level.
Different level, right.
My
yeah.
dad left earlier than he should have. He was in his 70s, but it wasn't that out of the realm of the natural order of things, right? When a child goes before a kid, before a parent, it's an entirely different mindset. It's an entirely different tragedy. And I that info that I got back then in 2001 was something that, the bottom line is, I think spirit or God or great spirit or Yahweh or whatever you want to call him, put this meeting in my path so that 16 years later I could draw on that info and find out where my son was.
Yes, which becomes other people's journey as well, which is the important part here, which is what your work does. You sharing it and not keeping it locked away, and sort of giving all your people, when they ask you, which I know you do, you're very open, tips and hacks in a sense, to make these connections or who to go see as well, is
Right.
such a help to so many people. And I know your wife is fully supporting this as well, because
Yes.
I've met her as well, and I think she's about to become an author, if I'm right. I think that Yep. So that's going to be interesting. 2 authors in the house, right?
Mine is kind of like sitting down and listen to me tell a story from an old Irish uncle or something. Hers is virtually beautiful prose. She's a brilliant gal. She's a healer. She's a therapist, helps people. We were at a wake today for a young man who passed away tragically in his late 30s. Just being we were in the same funeral parlor where they waked Chris. Now, you recall, but there were 2,000 people at Chris's wake, 2,000, and they left it open 2 hours. Grace Martinson, this wonderful funeral director, left the place open 2 additional hours so we could meet with everybody. And I write about the second book, which called, and I call them emotional landmines, where I was just listening to a book, and it talked about the one brother not wanting to leave the funeral parlor because he didn't want his brother to be alone. And I remember sitting in front of Christopher's casket when everybody else was gone, and it was cold, and I didn't want to leave him. And so those are the lessons for parents who are going to hear my words or read my book and say, these things are going to happen. Be prepared for it. By the way, this tsunami that just hit me, that hits often, right? That tsunami will go back out, and you can finish your day. But if you stifle it, it won't. It'll continue to haunt you.
Well, let's just mention that that's a really important part as well. You would say, and I think you would agree that grieving is a messy business, especially, people who do not want to go through that process. Some people don't.
Let go or be dragged, right? You're going through it whether you want to or not. You're going to deal with it, the grief, one way or the other. Choose to deal with it on the spirit that you're missing's terms, right? Alcohol is not going to help. Drugs aren't going to help. Gambling, women, none of that stuff's going to help with grief. The only thing that's going to help is the only way through it is to do it, Kevin.
Yes, which is what you demonstrate. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that. Thank you. Absolutely. And I know, we could go so much more into detail right now about this, but obviously time's limiting, and maybe we'll do another interview. I was thinking that before I started this one as well, because I know it's just been a crazy time for both of us a little bit, well, especially for myself. So this is such good information.
Hey, Kevin, I'm a guy that talks to his son, so I guess it's been a crazy time for me too.
Yeah, but look at what he's bringing through for you, though.
I mean, you know what? I got to tell you, if I could unring the bell, if I would give up, I would rather be abysmally ignorant of all things metaphysical and watch the Thursday night football game with my son having a pizza. But you can't unring that bell. It happened. What are you going to do with it?
Very true. You can't unring that bell. And, from reading the second book, Christopher told you that if events of 2016 had not happened, then, somewhere down the road, whether it's a year later, he would have transitioned and he was destined to exit early.
Right. And he told me that he felt his life was going to get messy. And the one solace I take is that if that is the truth, and there's no reason for me not to believe it, it came from him. If that's the truth, then this spared him all the heartache that went along with a messy life or a messy existence, So, I don't know. I'll literally know the answer until I transition, Kev. But I know that his being here was for a purpose and his leaving was for a purpose. And I've just got to accept it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know it's been very healing what you've brought through in the second book. And one thing he talked about in the second book as well, there was a number of things. And I think it was something to do with exit points, and this, which we just touched on now, right? But the idea that there's some sort of like hall pass, or there's some sort of like, you can explain it better than I can, because I've only sort of touched upon the book really. But in the sense that once we have these exit points, but there is something that changes after the third one.
Right. So let's start with the fact that I don't think we're predestined. I really don't. I think we have soul contracts that we make before we come to this world. So I don't think it's God pushing levers and moving trap doors, right? So I think when we come in, we have soul contracts. Teresa Russo, it was with the Long Island medium. Is it Teresa? It's Russo.
I know the medium, the Long Island medium.
Right, yeah. She wrote the Happy Medium. I'm sorry. She was the Happy Medium. She wrote a great book called The Happy Medium. And in it, she talks about exit points, and that the third one is always, where you run out of hall passes. And Chris had two near-death experiences. One where he flipped a pickup truck on the way he was working a ranch in southern Arizona, flipped a pickup truck, walked away with a sprained wrist. The car was crushed. The other time he fell down a 35-foot mine shaft. It was a 100-foot mine shaft. He fell down 35 feet, landed on a ledge. And he talked about him being down there with a guy dressed in white. Now, I thought he was hallucinating because I was told by everybody there that there was nobody there. And then later on, it was only after he transitioned that I realized there was an angel there. I don't look like a guy that's going to say to you, there was an angel there, but there was an angel there. But so he had his two near-death experiences. And the third one is the exit ramp that he had to take for some reason, heartbreaking as it is. And I pretty much as I've researched this, I pretty much won't know that answer until I make that journey myself. And then maybe I'll reach back to you and give you some answers from the other side,
I would love that. I don't want to see you go, Joe.
I'm
I
not
don't.
going anywhere,
I don't
buddy.
want to see. I want you to continue this work because I think it's absolutely so healing for so many people right now. Isn't it crazy? The last time I saw you, there was no pandemic, and now, we've lived through a
Right.
pandemic, all of us, and there's now a pandemic of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And it's very sad to see that people are suffering right now, and they are, right.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, some of these crazy things wouldn't be going on. So, I think the work that you're doing is and always has been very needed, but especially in times like right now.
You know what? I do think though that the veil is thinning. I think there's much more an awareness. Maybe it's the pandemic. Maybe this happened during the Black Plague. I don't know. But I do think that people are reevaluating things. And I think people are realizing, it's funny. As a family, we're going to a wedding on the 17th of December for my nephew, my great nephew, actually, who was a dear friend of Christopher's. And I mentioned them in both books. They were twin boys, and they're lovely. And I'm going for 2 days, and I've already looked online about where we're staying, airplanes, shuttles, how to get back and forth, good restaurants near the hotel, whatever, right? 2 days. And I've spent time researching. We're all going to the other side. And how many people take the time to figure out where we're going? What's next? Here, let me read this. This is from the second book. I'm reading from Chris on 10/16/18. He said, I miss you too, Dad. We will share this place, this incredible place. It will be like crossing a shallow stream. You have to cross it yourself, but I'm right on the other side. So it's just natural to walk across to me. And then you're in. You'll be on the other side, you and me. How's that for awesome? But not today. Today is for writing books and presentations. Carry the word, Pop. We're all behind you here. Now, that's none of that. I mean, that's not information I knew till he told me. And I thought, I guess we have to voluntarily make that last step. They can't greet you and walk across with you. In my case, it's a stream. It's somebody else's. It might be a bridge. I don't know, but I do know that I'm given insights where I'm going, and it's pretty friggin' terrific.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in this book, there's some great stuff, and some of it, I've heard before, but I think the way that you guys bring it through, it's just a little bit different. I think you could go into depth just on the bloody, past life review, if there is such a thing. You could do a book just on that, and you're touching all these little subjects, and they're all a little bit different, and that's what I like about it as well. He talked about the trauma with the crossing as well. That if we've got some sort of trauma, trauma when we cross, whatever that may be, right? And how he
It's brilliant,
that.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
it's brilliant. So what happened? And I had no awareness of this, Cap. Once again, that anybody saying that's just the old man trying to soothe his pain, right? Chris tells me things that I don't know anything about. Also, Chris tells me to do things I don't want to do. Let go of a grudge, forgive somebody. Well, I'm Irish. I don't want to let go of grudges. We held them against your people for 200 years. You know what I mean? So what they say, Irish Alzheimer's is where you forget everything but the grudges. So he said to me that he said, Dad, I promise when Marcia crosses, which she did in February of 2019, when she crosses, I'll be there. And so after she transitioned, he said, I told you, Dad, that I'd be there. And when she transitioned, when she crossed, Jerry, Billy, Bobby, Pat, we were all there to meet her. But then she had to go somewhere, like a spa. And when she came back, she was younger than even when I was a kid. So he's telling me that her cancer stayed with her body when they put her body in the ground here, but the trauma crossed with her soul. So she had to go someplace. And what nicer way for a woman to think of than go to a spa? So she went to a spa where she worked through that trauma, rejoined the family with the youth and vitality that Chris hadn't seen in 20 years. Now, how amazing, or Chris said, in 20 years, how amazing is that?
Yeah, I love that little bit when I read it, because I just thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna, speak to Joe about that. And look, I know there was lots in this book that I haven't read. And what were some of the more amazing things that you brought through in this second book, do you think? I mean, obviously we can't go through everything. Just if you just want to name one or two.
I think that the thin places that really encourages parents to seek out that spiritual place where your soul is comfortable and their soul is comfortable, that'll help you go forward. The revelation about what crossing over is like. Heck, he just told me that I'm going to be in a group of family. And he said to me, when you cross, Dad, the circle will be completed, which means I'm the last of the original siblings, the blood siblings. I'm the last one on this side. I saw a medium, Andrew Anderson, who's a very dear friend of mine. And now, through our medium stuff. And he said to me, early on, he said, so how many siblings do you have? And I said, I have 4 on the other. He said, no, you got 1. I said, no, I got 4. He said, you have 1. And then I stopped and thought, my family was 2 cousins' families put together after a tragic car accident, which I talk about in the first book. So there were 10 kids. Well, 5 were literally my blood siblings. The other one, we were raised as siblings. I still consider my brother and sister, but they were, scientifically my cousins. I had only had 1 sibling left, who was Marcia, who transitioned. And I'm trying to argue with this guy, and the bottom line is he was right. I had 1. And Chris tells me that circle will be complete. Chris tells me he wants me to continue this work. He also tells me, keeps me emotionally, kicked in a corner and every once in a while. And he'll say, look, Dad, you're not an expert. You're gaining some knowledge and you got to share it. And he told me, Kev, that I have to give it away to keep it, right? I've got this massive knowledge given from the other side that I can't hoard like a treasure. I've got to share it. The emails that I get, and by the way, my email address, jbmcquillen@gmail.com. Anybody listening to this wants to reach out, send me something, ask a question. My joemcquillen.net is my website, but my email address, reach out, man. That's what I'm supposed to do. So, dang it, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think there is I don't know whether you covered this in the first book or the second book. There is this obviously, well, maybe it was the second. This obviously this almost like twin flameness between you and Chris in a sense. Yeah, there we go.
So I always have the candle with 2 wicks to represent our twin flame. And I didn't even know what the heck a twin flame was. Kevin, I walked in with very little, if no knowledge of what the metaphysical meant. And I did understand after an explanation that we shared the same soul, him and I. So you talk about past life regression. Well, a big part of, I'm doing that in the 3rd book, and that the medium that I connected with this morning, Lisa Morrison, also deals with past life regression. I did it. I tried it. I need somebody who was better at it. And I think she's the gal. I think Spirit put her in my path today. I want to do a reading with her, and I want to do a past life regression with her, because I know that I've been told Christopher and I have been in each other's lives numerous times. And one of the reasons we were so comfortable hanging out, Kev, is that we were siblings on the other side in a lifetime or 2. So it wasn't just father, son. But Christopher said, don't worry, Dad, that when you cross, we'll always be father and son. That's how I'll see him. And he'll always be, my feeling, he'll always be 21, is that the spirits, when they cross, when you see them, you view them as their very best. To be honest with you, I'm a better 64, almost 65-year-old guy than I was a 35-year-old guy. I was kind of self-centered, and I'd run people over for my own good. And I would, and that's just unfortunate. I wish I wasn't, but that's true. So I'm a better guy. So I got a feeling that when I come back to my kids or whoever, I'm going to come very much like, this guy with the gray crew cut and the broken nose, and that's how you'll notice, Chris will always be that beautiful 21-year-old that looks like Brad Pitt. I did a chapter called Good Eggs. And I talk about the good eggs in my life. What a good term. And that's from a term from the movie Moneyball, where he had seen his buddy, his assistant made him watch, and where a guy went through adversity right in front of him and came out on top. And he said to him, "You're a good egg." And I listed the good eggs in my life, and I realized Chris was a good egg, a real good egg. And at the end of my run here, Kev, and it's no time soon, if people look back and say, you know what, old Joe, he was a good egg, then I knew I did my job and I made my son proud.
Yes. And yeah, I guess your fear of death has sort of
None.
None. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Chicago, or there's a lot of places that will always be very special for you. And obviously, when I met you in Chicago being one of them.
When I was in Florida, my wife, did a bunch of renovations. Just structurally it's the same, but we redid the kitchen and did all that and upgraded everything. And so next time you're swinging by, we still got the same bedroom for you, buddy. It's just a little nicer.
Thank you.
And so we did it. And so when I got home, the next door neighbor said to me, "Hey, God, we put a pergola on the back deck, redid the deck. It's wonderful." And she said, "I saw a bunch of work that you did." She said, Are you doing the work because you're selling the house?" I said, "No." "Are you planning on selling?" She said, "No." I said, "I'm planning on dying here, so I'd like it nicer." I think I scared her, Kev. And I didn't mean I'm dying soon, but if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this house, why not make it perfect, right? Because I'm going to stay here until it's time to cross.
I could never see you leaving that house, to be honest. Or if you did, nope. It would be a home away from somewhere. You'd always have this home.
I'll always, and I said, I'll spend 2 months in Florida golfing, writing, smoking cigars, working. My kids will each come down for a week or two. My wife will meet me in Casey Key for a week, and we go up to Siesta Key because the sand on Siesta Key is quartz crystal, and I always keep some Siesta Key sand around because it's not sand, and it's kind of like a cell tower for me. So I'm a big fan of the Siesta Key, and I thought that was all like a myth, like an urban legend. And I looked it up, and the sand on Siesta Key is 99.9% quartz crystal, flown down from the Appalachian Mountains 2,000 years ago. So I always keep some of this. I sprinkle it around when I'm writing notes, when I'm taking messages from Chris, and it just enhances. All these things. All it does is focuses your mind so that you can, and your soul, so that you can prepare better for messages.
Yeah, and you talk about that in your books as well. I think what I'd like to do is maybe do another interview with yourself, and not too long, and just maybe just go into some of the, having read the book properly this time, but go into some of the teachings, in a sense. There's some of the information that Chris does give, because I know there's quite a bit in there, and it's just nice to sort of recover your story again, and maybe we can use this as a part one, and then we'll do a very not too long part two interview for this as well, where we can go into some of those points.
I would love to, Kevin.
Yeah,
I'd love to talk to you anytime you want, buddy.
I'd love to do that. So I think just wrapping this up then as well, is obviously your websites are
joemcquillen.net. And it has a bunch of interviews, and when you send this one, that'll obviously join the top. Your old one is on that interview, is there too?
Oh, that, yes.
That's been my favorite. I shared that with everybody.
Thank you.
I don't know if you ever recall, I'd read every single comment. There were 71,000 views, Kat. And I replied to every single comment. And one talked about, at one point, you see a feather come floating down across the screen. And I didn't notice it until one of your guys saw it and commented on it, and I just thought that was amazing. So I love that interview. I think it touched a lot of people. One thing that's real important, and I don't look like a guy that would quote Haruki Murakami, do I? But he said, once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure, in fact, whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what storms are all about. And after this storm, I'm a different guy than I was prior to January 3rd, 2016. That's what storms are all about.
That's a great quote. Let me just say that. I love that quote, and how true that is as well. What would you say then, as we sort of wrap up here? Because I know this can change, but what would you say is an important message now since doing this second book?
It hasn't changed. The message is, what happened is I found out the message in the first book, and I'm supposed to share it in the second book. And the message is what's the brilliant Susan Geisman's titled one of her books. And I steal it when I'm autographing a book. I'll use her still right here. You know, your kids, your loved ones are still right here. They're there. What are you doing about it? You know, so they're not evaporated. They're not gone. They're here. You got to do your work. You got to do the steps. You got to figure this out, because there's nothing more important. You know, I laugh. In the second book, I was sitting on a beach in Naples, and I was flying out the next morning. You know, Marcia was going to transition the next following week, and I got a message that said, go to Siesta Key. And I was like, dang, Chris, that's 4 hours round trip. But I thought, okay. So I said, I'm going to make you a deal. I'm going to look on my cell phone. And if the beach is open, I'm going. If it's not, I'm not going to go up there and be staring, you know, look at the moose at the front gate should have showed you we were closed, you know, like in Wally World. So I get there and dang, it says beach open 24 hours. So I grab a couple of cigars, sorry hurts, grab a couple of Red Bulls, drive up. Took me an hour and 40 minutes to get up there, laid on the beach, looked at the stars, felt Chris all around me. And I knew that he was at that point poking a friend in heaven saying, see, I told you the old man was going to come. So when I talk to people, I say, hey, if you could spend an hour with your kid and it's going to take you 3 or 4 hours round trip, would you do it? Well, you know what? Listen to the messages. Follow the breadcrumbs. They're trying to connect with you.
Well, Joe, so much left unsaid, but we'll come back to that. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Thank you.
Well, Kevin, there's no place on the planet right now I'd rather be than talking to you right here.
I appreciate that, brother.
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that. Thank you.